my name is Janice B. Gordon, and this is Scale Your Sales Podcast. Welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, listed number 9 of 43 best podcasts for every sales professional. I am Janice B. Gordon, a customer growth expert, awarded RevTech Strategist Award 2024. In this week's episode of Scale Your Sales Podcast, my guest talks about coming from a scientific background and working in sales. She talks about growth mindset, curiosity, and empathy, and particularly working in a cross-functional organization to ensure that you have end-to-end journey for your customer that's frictionless. She really speaks my language when we're talking about customer-centric sales. More or less everything tripping out of her mouth. I'm going like this. It's a fantastic conversation. My next guest, career trajectory, is a captivating story of transformation and resilience, transitioning from a clinical lab scientist to the senior vice president of client engagement at BESLER. Her wealth of experience in sales, marketing, and customer success positions her as a valuable leader, guiding professionals seeking to excel in revenue-related roles. Welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, Randi-Sue Deckard.
Thank you so much for having me, Janice. I'm so thrilled to reconnect with you since we met in Nashville last year.
Yes. And I want to, Randi-Sue Deckard or Randy?
Randy, I leave Randi-Sue on LinkedIn just because it's more unique, but yeah, everyone calls me Randy.
Yeah, we met at Pavilion. I was speaking at that event in Nashville, and yeah, we just kind of locked on ever since then. So it's a real honor to have you on the podcast. I'm really keen to find out your kind of unique way of cross-functionally making sure that you're able to deliver for your customers. So we'll get into that in a moment. But first, tell me more about your journey, because it's quite an interesting journey. You started more on the scientific side.
Yeah, so I was actually a clinical scientist, did research, and thought that I wanted to be a forensic pathologist. And I had the opportunity to come to the commercial side of healthcare. And I was actually really driven by my pathologist mentor. He's like, you need to be on the commercial side of healthcare. The way you speak, the way you break down complex things, the way you think, you're wasting your talents. And I had the opportunity to go to a startup that was selling to pathologists. So, for anyone out there, who is thinking about, going into sales, think about what you currently do, who you engage with, whether it's professionally or whether you have a creative hobby, whatever it is, and who do you know? So part of my success that I was able to demonstrate is because I actually knew the customer like the back of my hand. I knew their day-to-day because I walked their walk, right? And I was really able to add value. And I also just have a growth mindset, always be learning and just extremely curious. And that was really what set me up for success. And my science background, that curiosity, experimenting, iterating forward. There's a quality process improvement, a mindset that I have, but it's always like, how can I do this better every single time? And how can I, like the end result, the outcome, how can I have the customer articulate to me the value that I'm delivering? I know that I'm successful or I'm doing the right thing when the customer can articulate the value they're receiving from a product or service. That's when you know you have it, and you circle back and bring that back. And how do we message that to others? How do we put that in a case study? How do we talk like the customer, who said that this is what the value is? How do we talk to other customers? How do we scale that?
I think that's really interesting and an excellent point, that your customer is able to articulate the value they will receive from you. So how do you get to that point? How do you, ensure that not only you have to get it, but the customer is able to articulate it?
So this is where I think it is asking better questions, right? So, it's how does the customer define success? It's not about what our features or benefits or our internal corporate speak. That is nothing. It's like in your day-to-day, how does this help you? How does this help your team? And what's the impact for, your customers, like, the customers that they serve? Like I'm in healthcare, so it's like, how does this impact patients, right? I know that a CFO is happy to get a bigger check because he can serve a larger amount of patients in his community. Very simple. I'm not talking about we have, these XY features in our software, right? So the more simple you can be in listening and bringing that back, that will resonate with more people. And I think sometimes people make it more complicated. Well, I'm not sometimes, a lot of times people make it more complicated than it needs to be. And so many times when I've gone into roles or when I've been talking to peers or advising, I ask, so how frequently do you talk to your customers and ask? And sometimes I literally get that deer in the headlight look and I'm like, oh, you haven't. Well, step one, let's talk to the customers. And I like I said, any role that I've taken, that's the first thing in I call it the listening tour, the first 30 days. It's not just listening to employees, what they have to say, because that also tells you a lot. But it's like, how many customers can I get in front of? How many sales calls can I listen into? Because I really want to hear how the customer speaks, what they say. And then if I can go on site and see actually how they use it, can I sit down side by side? I'm really curious. And I have just learned so much just by being curious and just asking, hey, I want to help you. Can I see how you use it? I just want to better understand. And people have been very receptive and taking that knowledge and bringing it back to the organization and saying, this is what I've seen from this swath of customers. This is how they're using it. That's not how we're positioned. And this is not how we're talking. We are missing, a huge portion of the conversation that, could drive a win. And they don't even realize we need to have a better point of view. And you get that better point of view and distinct point of view by talking to customers. And even customers, prospective customers who say no, I always help me understand, why you just decided not to do something, why did you decide not to move forward, or why you went with someone else. And it's very rarely price. If they decide not to do something, it's usually because they feel like the change is not worth it. And so I always talk about the cost of inaction internally. Like, we have to be change agents. We are the experts in the process. We have to have a strong point of view, and we have to guide them to show them how frictionless this can be. I'm not saying it isn't work, but we make it as frictionless as possible and have agreement on what mutual success looks like. And even though we have a distinct point of view, every customer is going to have things unique to their business. And if you're not elevating the conversation and finding that out, you're not going to be seen as that trusted strategic advisor. And it's either going to move slowly, stall out, because they just don't see the value in making the change. It's working right now, or, I'm cobbling things together, or yeah, I realize, but that's a lot of work. You have to be able to navigate that conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there's two things that I want to kind of pick up here. And one, I love what you said about having a distinct point of view, because it's really difficult for customers to decide on what is your point of difference unless you actually have that. Otherwise, it's all a commodity and it's all very much the same. And that's when you get into the zone of indecision and status quo, and it's too much effort to move in this direction because you don't have a distinct point of view. Then on the other side, what you said, you know, like understanding what are the blocks and the barriers, what are the priorities of the customers. So it's kind of like bringing those two things kind of closer together and seeing where you can actually hit.
Right. And just to tease that out a little bit, like the simplest way that I talk about it with my team is, does the customer agree they have a problem? How did the customer articulate it? And do they agree it's a problem solving worth right now? And you have to do that throughout the whole process, but that is the easiest and simplest way I can break it down. And lots of times people, like I said, get so stuck on the features and benefits that they're not listening. And that's a big one, right? You got to really listen. What is the customer articulating the problem actually is? And is it a problem that they feel is worth solving right now? And if you have a strong point of view, you may be able to say, oh, with other customers I've talked about, I've heard similar things, but these are some of the things that, you know, as they move forward, we uncovered. Are any of those things that you've thought about? So it's like helping them uncover blind spots or things that they may not even have thought about. And that is something, like I said, having a strong point of view. And the only way you can do that is if you've been lockstep with other customers, that you can't just take market industry insights. You need both. You need that and the customer's point of view to help you have your own unique point of view and how you can really help customers.
I love this because I talk a lot about customer-centric sales and also selling from the buyer's point of view rather than from your own point of view. And for many years talked about, you know, speaking the customer's language and really understanding what it's like in their world. And many of the kind of blocks and barriers are actually not necessarily on your side, but it's in the customer side. But that becomes your problem. You have to help them to remove those barriers. But if you're not even aware that there are those blocks and barriers, then it's not going to happen.
100%. And, you know, if a customer can articulate what the problem is and, you know, what it's costing the organization, what it's costing, you know, them personally in their role and the organization, you know, then you can start having those conversations. Well, you know, who else does this impact in the organization? Because we all know, I mean, sales has gotten harder, not easier, in that you need to multi-thread. But if you can have someone really articulate they have a problem that's worth solving, they're gonna help you form an opinion of who needs to be on the buying committee, how they need to be approached. Well, okay, this impacts this department. Okay, tell me more. Well, who should I talk to understand, you know, how they think about this? And in your experience, you know, what things have they brought up? So at least you have some background, but it's an interesting dynamic, and you have to have all the players in the room. And there's a reason why they say sales is a team sport. It's not just internally, it's externally, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, in your experience, what sales competencies directly impact the customer's experience, how they experience you as a seller?
Empathy and really actively listening and being curious and seeking to understand. Everyone wants to be seen, valued, and heard. They don't care about your product. They care about how they can be the hero in their own story. And so many people approach it the other way. Oh, the company's the hero with a product. No, 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 no. I'm all about what's in it for them. Like, how can I impact them? How can I help them? And I think that is just so critical. You have to have that mindset that you are a conduit to help this person and in their department, in their company, succeed and thrive, and whether it's save money, bring new customers for them, whatever the case may be. But that is your job.
Yeah.
And if you can't actively listen or be empathetic or be curious or really seek to understand, because let's face it, humans are not always logical. It's emotions and logic. And I think a lot of people forget about that. That's why like sales psychology is a huge thing. And anyone who gets that understands that, even though logically this may make sense, there is a human being on the other end. So human to human, and people buy from people.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're both women here, both in the sales environment. So you coming from a scientific background and the way that you approach your art, do you think that there is a difference, or in your experience working with a diverse team, do you think there's a difference in the way that salesmen and saleswomen approach this balance between the kind of logic and the empathy, the art and the science?
I definitely do think that women do tend to be more empathetic in general. Although I have worked with some women that is not the case. Women tend to be better, I would say, active listeners, but these are all skills that people can learn, right? But definitely, and it's interesting we're having this conversation. I was recommended a book, Humans Are Underrated by Jeff Colvin. And it was written 2015-16, but there's a section in there where he talks about a study that women were better and more effective in leading meetings and in roles because they actively listened and got everyone to collaborate. And of course, better together, go farther together, right? And then there was another book, Actively Listening, and I can't remember the author, I just blanked, but he referenced the same study. So I was like, whether or not regardless of your gender, you can learn these skills, but I think for some people it's more natural.
Yeah. Okay, so talk to me more about cross-functional working cross-functionally in an organization so that you get the end-to-end journey that is frictionless. You've already mentioned creating an experience that's frictionless for the customer, but that has to start internally working across functionally. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, so the first thing that I do whenever I've joined an organization, regardless of my role, is like I want to understand the customer journey. And so that means that I meet with everyone. How do they interact? I go on what I call a listening tour the first 30 days. And it's always obvious to me where there's silos in the organization, how they think about customer interactions. And instead of being transactional, this department does this department does this, I'm always thinking 360. And how does the customer experience the organization? And wherever there are easy pickups, like, hey, if we just had these two teams share this information or made this one process change, this is one less thing that the customer would have to do. And it can be like, when I think about the digitization of so many things like automated invoices, before someone would have to open mail, whereas it could just come to their email. Like sometimes the friction that we cause is can be really frustrating and annoying to a customer. And then sometimes like we put our processes on them. Like I've been in companies where, or actually I'll flip this. I have tried to be a buyer myself of software license. And I have like signed up, say, hey, I'm ready to buy, and they want to show me a demo. I'm like, no, just like, how do I buy this? So like not listening to me, but they have this process. I'm like, why are you doing this? Like I just want to I just want to pay you so I can get started, right? And you have to get everyone in the room. Once you see these gaps, you need to get everyone in the room, and you need leadership buy-in. And as many times that I have heard organizations say they're customer centric, I'm the first to like poke holes. Are we really living up to our mission and saying that we are customer centric? And like I said, lots of times people are transactional. They have a checklist. I'm doing this for the customer. It's their process. It's not serving the customer. And if you can get everyone in a room with leadership buy-in, you can literally, with a whiteboard, sticky notes, these are some of the friction points I see. Okay, well, if we just did this, that would remove. And some things are super easy, some things are longer term, some things may require investment. But I've found more often than not, if you get people in a room, especially the people who are on the front facing edge, the ones who deal with the customer, they're the ones who have the best ideas. Well, this is stupid. If we could just do this, and sometimes it's just empowering employees. You think about, I don't know if you have a pet, but in the States, Chewy.com. I know it's B2C, but I love them. I will be a customer for life. I have had so many amazing experiences. Like, I have 2 big dogs. I ordered some coats because we had Snowmageddon, and I guess my dogs are fluffier, the XL. And so I called them. I said, hey, how do I return? They're like, hey, just donate them. We got the next XXL size on its way. And I can give you story and story about Chewy. Their front lines are empowered to make it frictionless for me. Hey, do you have a local shelter you can donate to those? Don't ship them back. Make someone else's day. You know how good that made me feel, that I get to go into the shelter with these 2 coats? Like, that's magic. And in CX, there's a term called moments of truth, MOT. And that's what you're always trying to do. And I always say you need to be consistent before you wow, right? So a lot of people jump to the wow. I'm like, no, you need to be consistent before you wow.
Absolutely. And there's lots to be learnt in the B2C world, that the B2B still, we're still lagging behind in terms of creating that 360 experience, because we still tend to see B2B as business to business, whereas actually it's people to people, it's humans.
Yes, and that's the missing ingredient, right? You forget. And whatever you can do to make it easier, like if someone wants to have a conversation to buy, like let them buy. Don't like, oh, you have to have a demo and then we have to talk to my manager. Like, what? Like, just let me buy.
It sounds crazy, but it happens way too often. Yeah. Another area I love talking about is referrals. Referrals, we're so kind of locked into this net new logos. We're measured the hell out of it, forgetting that we have our best salespeople, which are our existing customers. It's a massive resource that we really do not tap into nearly enough. And I know that this is, an area that you're also kind of tapped into.
Yeah, this is something that's near and dear to my heart is, post sales, what happens, right? Customer gets onboarded, maybe there's survey scores, QBRs, but how often do you ask for a referral? And, how do you know that your customers or our evangelists or brand ambassadors for you? So lots of times when I ask those questions, I also get the deer in the headlights look. And I'm like, we're missing a huge opportunity. So where are our customers talking about us? And, even after a sales process, is there any customers that you would, that you think that I should be talking to? Like, I'm not waiting, but also once they've articulated value, come back to them. But I also make it easy. for customers when I'm asking. If there's certain people that I know that they know, hey, once you get to a certain point and you feel comfortable, do you think you would be willing to, introduce me to? And you plant a seed, right? And that's part of the relationship and playing the long game. But there needs to be multiple places that you insert a referral process. And I say process because everyone knows that, oh, that's easy, but are they actually doing it?
Mm.
And there's more than one place that you can do it. And I think it's super critical. And you are can be missing up to 30%. And I say up to 30% of getting new sales. I've been at companies where once we started this motion, I could attribute 30% of our new revenue sales to a referral process. Like how they came in was initially from a referral.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, when you have a referral, they've now understand the motion, the process, they're more likely to refer.
Yeah. And actually those, and interestingly enough, those deals go quicker.
Yeah.
Because that peer-to-peer trust. And so I am always trying to find ways to build peer-to-peer trust. And one of my favorite ways, when I was selling to pathologists, I would do lunch and learns. Some were customers, some were not, but everyone wants education and to hear an interesting case. And so some of my best customers would be talking about working with me, and other pathologists go like, well, how do I work with Randy? Right. And they're like, I didn't say anything. I just brought peers together, and I still do that today, but just in different ways in the industry that I'm in. But I like, where are your customers talking about you when you're not in the room? That's another place. If you know that you have champions, how do you replicate that, more of that? And then just keep asking.
Yeah.
And obviously you're adding value. So, I always talk about, you have to have bank with someone before you ask for something. So that when you've had value, but you can start the conversation.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people shy away from it. I haven't. And it's in our processes, and there's multiple points where it's acceptable to ask.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it becomes a really big thing if it's one big ask, but it's not. Exactly what you've said, you're seeding it all the time, all the way through. And don't forget, because it's part and parcel of how you do things. So I absolutely love that. Okay, so if you're on a desert island, Randy, what would be the one thing you took with you?
I was like, fire starter knife, but I have to go fire starter because like I can cook if I catch a fish or whatever. So I'm going fire starter.
You're going fire starter. Interesting. So you got there quite quickly. So I wonder if this is something you would relish or you would absolutely not enjoy, being on a desert island on your own.
So as much as an extrovert and I love being around people, I also need to fill my cup, and I would quite enjoy just having some solitude for a moment to like reflect.
It's yours. I'm giving it to you.
Awesome. Awesome.
All right, Randi-Sue, it's been an absolute pleasure. You absolutely, almost every word that came out of your mouth, you're speaking my language. It's just why we connected so much last year. I absolutely love what you do. And, the listeners, I'm sure that they'll be connecting with you and follow you on LinkedIn. So how can listeners get hold of you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is definitely the place to connect and follow me. That is where I am definitely the most active.
Excellent, excellent. So thank you for being a guest on Scale Your Sales podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Scale Your Sales podcast. If you like this discussion, feel free to listen to other episodes or watch the captioned show on YouTube and subscribe to future episodes. I would really appreciate it if you would leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you.